Hello and welcome to Jericho's Infusion, where we infuse the sheer joy of creativity and innovation into our everyday meals. Today we are making this delicious fall off the bone, fork tender pot roast with some vegetables and a delicious gravy-like sauce that will pair perfectly with some butter noodles and with some rice and perfect for your Sunday lunch. Come along with me to my kitchen. Let's infuse this yumminess. Alright, friends, here are all the ingredients that we are going to be needing to infuse this delicious umami pot roast. You'll find the list of them in the description box down below, okay? I am making this pot roast and I'm giving it an African twist. And the reason is simple. I am adding some extra spices and pepper because I am Nigerian and I love pot roast, but I don't really like how bland it is without the pepper. It's delicious, trust me, but I love my pot roast very spicy. So here are some of the spices that I am going to be using to infuse and marinate my beef with, okay? And of course, I got some flour. Now for the meat. What kind of meat to buy for your pot roast is perfect if you can get a chuck roast, and you look for a meat, you see the marbling of it. It has little bits of delicious fatty flavors throughout the entire meat, which when cooked in a moist environment will give it that tender texture. I'm using the T-bone because I didn't get the chalk roast and it still gave me a very delicious pot roast. Okay, now you might be tempted to buy a softer kind of beef, but the tougher the cut of meat, the better the pot roast, because the tougher cuts of meat have lots of tough connective tissues that once when cooked for long periods it softens really well. Now I washed my pot roast. You want to pat it really dry, and well, if you're bringing it out of your fridge or freezer, make sure you let it sit and for at least 30 minutes so that it will get to room temperature. Okay, now I'm patting this dry so that the salt and my seasonings will absorb into the meat perfectly. So I am using some peppers, some thyme, some dry garlic powder, and then I'm going to add a quarter cup of flour. Now I'm going to use this in two batches, this mix I am making here, and of course I seasoned with some salt. Now for pot roast, you have to be very careful with the salt because you do not want salty pot roast. Trust me, you wouldn't like it. So you have to make sure that you measure out your salt to taste, but not too much. Okay, moderation is key. Now after mixing all my spices together, I am going to set part of it in a tray like this, and I'm going to lay my meat on top, and I'm going to season both sides. Now the thing about the T-bone is it doesn't have a lot of that fatty marbling. It still has it, but not a lot. That's why you should look out for the chuck roast that has a lot of marbling in it. But this was still perfect, and after it fell off the bone. So you want to put all of this, and I let this sit for about 2 hours. You can see that once you pat the meat dry, it's absorbing all of that seasoning. Look at that, it's stuck beautifully, and that is what we want. It's already working. Now we're moving on to the next stage. We are going to saute. We're going to brown our beef. Okay, so now I'm using two pans because I have 4 cuts of meat here, so I'm going to put 2 in each pan. You want to put some olive oil, a generous amount, and then we're going to cook on both sides for about 6 to 5 minutes. So that'll give us about 10 to 12 minutes of cook time. So when you're working with meat, make sure you wash your hands after touching meat, okay, before continuing to avoid contamination. So as you can see, as the flour has started to caramelize. Just look at that. We're going to fix that. Look at that. So what we want is this nice crust and a beautiful golden brown color. So we're taking that out of the pan, okay? Look at that. Beautiful. Now let's go on and make some of our gravy. I'm going to add a little bit of oil to this pan, and that's a lot of flavor anyway. And I'm going to go in with the remainder of my flour and my seasoning. So first of all, I sauteed some onions and some of my garlic and some of my peppers. I am going to put some chunk of fresh garlic inside the pot roast itself that I sauteed, just a little bit of that. So now I'm adding in the rest of my flour to form that gravy, and I want to cook this flour because we do not want raw tasting flour in our gravy, okay? So we want to cook this up for about 4 to 5 minutes. So I'm going to add some extra oil, olive oil. One beautiful thing about this pot roast is allowing the meat to simmer for hours, resulting in the tender melt in your mouth roast. And friends, it's so delicious. Now I added my beef broth. Friends, this beef broth is going to make this super flavorful. You can use chicken broth, you can use water, and I went in with some wine, a quarter cup of wine, because you want some acidity in your pot roast, okay? So I went in with all of that, and now it's time to put all of this together. This is really easy, inexpensive, and super delicious, and I had a lot left over and it went around for 2 more meals. So this is really, really inexpensive and is worth it. The only thing required for this delicious recipe is patience. You need a great deal of patience. You can't rush the process. Cooking at a slightly higher temperature for a shorter period of time will result in a tough, dried out meat and there'll be no gravy for you. So that's not what we want. I'm going in with some potatoes. Now with your potatoes, you can make this a dish and a meal of its own, but I paired this with some butter noodles and it was absolutely delicious. It was heavenly. And in goes my Scotch bonnet peppers. Don't forget, I seasoned the meat earlier with some dried peppers, and I am going in with some mushrooms, and of course my carrots and some chunks of onions, not so chunky, I actually pieces them, and some fresh herbs. I wish I had me some celery for this recipe, but no, I don't. So now I'm pouring all that gravy into it, and I'm going to let this cook in the oven at 300 degrees. This took me about 3 hours, yes, because I really wanted that fork tender, fall off the bone consistency for my pot roast. It was absolutely delicious. This recipe is a winner. You will love it. Now, check out my butter noodles recipe and pair this with your pot roast, or you can have this with some white rice. You can eat it just as it is with the addition of your potatoes. And after about 3 hours, this is what we have. Look at that. Look at that. Now, my deepest apologies to you. I honestly don't know what happened. I lost the footage of me dishing this out, cutting the meat into tiny pieces for you to see how soft, flavorful this is. By the time this was out of the oven, the bone had already fallen off, but this is what we have. Thank you so much, friends, for watching. I hope you give this recipe a try. See you in my next video. Bye.